If you clicked on this video, you're probably a super ambitious self-learner, someone who strives for true excellence and self-mastery. But if you're anything like me, you probably struggle from time to maximize how much, how fast, and how deeply you learn new topics and skills. That's why in this video, I'm going to lay out 3 reasons that you need to start developing systems for your learning, as well as 3 strategies for implementing your own learning system that I've discovered over my years as an educator, trainer, and published academic that will help you outperform the majority of people who aren't using these strategies. Starting with the first reason you need to think in systems: cognitive hygiene. I don't know about you, but the more I learn about different topics, the more I realize how little I actually know. Yet, I still have this hunger to try to learn about and become an expert on pretty much every field. Unfortunately, though, at least with a human brain, this is impossible. But if this isn't possible, how can you develop enough knowledge in key areas while not overwhelming yourself and still having some semblance of a life outside of self-study? Well, this is where the power of systems comes in. Think about all the activities in your daily life that are pretty much automated. Brushing your teeth, taking a shower, driving to work, and so on. If you had to expend cognitive effort on each of these tasks, you would be completely overwhelmed and wouldn't be able to focus on accomplishing additional tasks throughout your week. In fact, the very reason you automate these tasks is precisely so you can focus like a laser beam on the tasks that really matter the most, while cutting out all the noise. Yet very few of us implement this same thinking with respect to our learning, and we therefore spend so much cognitive effort on lower level learning tasks that we can never break through to invest our cognitive effort on higher level priorities that could take our learning abilities to the next level. But how can we actually apply this principle? Well, in 1945, the mathematician George Polya published a book called How to Solve It. And although it was developed as a systems-based approach to solving engineering-related problems, we can apply many of his now well-known approaches to our learning habits as well. Do you read and study at specific times, or do you do these activities simply when you feel like it? Do you have specific times in your calendar to review what you've learned, or no? Do you take notes in a specific way? Do you have a specific folder or organizational system for new research or studies you find? Do you regularly have conversations about what you learn with others? Really take a moment to fully analyze your learning habits. And then when you're ready, engage in Polya's first step. Understand the problem. You see, by the end of assessing your learning habits, you might be satisfied with your progress. In that case, that's fantastic, because the last 2 parts of this video will only help you further enhance the depth of your learning. But if not, in other words, if you're not satisfied with your learning progress, you have to clearly identify the problem, or you'll continue to struggle. Is the problem that you don't learn fast enough? Is it that you learn fast but lack depth in your learning? Is it simply that once you learn something, you forget it too easily? Or is it purely an emotional issue you're struggling with? I'll be completely honest with you. For several years while I was running my first business, I had a lapse in my self-learning habits, at least the academic ones. While I was running my first business, my only focus for years was learning business, and I completely abandoned academia for that period of time. So when I eventually came back to focusing on the academic world again, I realized I had a lot of reviewing to do, and I wanted to do it fast. You see, I defined my problem clearly in this case. As a result, I started implementing a system of weekly habits that I had taught not only to my sales team in my first business, but also to countless students in the subsequent academic test prep agency I was running. And my hope is that by outlining this system for you, you might get some inspiration to start building your own. Which brings us to the second reason you should think in systems: creating reproducible results. As we've seen, we want to create a degree of automation in our habits so we can offload our cognitive efforts and put our focus toward more productive activities. I knew that this would be impossible for me to achieve if I didn't have 2 cornerstones holding my system together. 1, a schedule with discrete tasks, and 2, an information storage method. But what tasks should I input into my schedule in the first place? Which activities, when done repeatedly from week to week, would be the 20% that give me 80% of the solution to my stated problem. Well, fortunately, Polya also lays out some key questions to ask yourself at this step. 1, have you seen a similar problem before? 2, can you relate this problem to one you already know how to solve? 3, can you simplify the problem? 4, can you work backwards from the desired result? And 5, can you divide the problem into smaller parts? After having asked myself some similar questions, I decided that I could create a hybrid version of systems I had used previously from doing sales training and also from my experience teaching academic students one-on-one and in classes. And so my schedule included the following. 1, times to listen to audiobooks on broad topics such as introductory topics, which would help me fill in any potential gaps in my memory of the topic as a whole. 2, times to read specific books and take notes. And 3, a discrete time in my calendar for review at least once per week, which would include giving some lecture on the topic to myself while standing in front of the room. But while a schedule with discrete tasks is vital, I realized it wouldn't work for me if I didn't have number 2 here, an information storage method. As I started to dive back into academic journals, sign up for academic newsletters, and so on, I found myself quickly buried in a sea of information with virtually no structure. And that's when I decided to implement 3 key components. 1, using Notion, a free app, to organize any studies I found by topic. 2, daily journaling. And 3, good old-fashioned note-taking on my Google Docs. Once I eventually had all of these habits automated, I found I could pursue higher and higher level material that was genuinely new for me, instead of simply review from the years of study I had missed. But how did any of these become automated, like brushing my teeth? Well, it was a process, but what I find especially helpful for me is putting everything into a Google Calendar. I mean, if I didn't already brush my teeth every day, which would be kind of gross, but roll with the example here, I would literally enter the words brush your teeth at a specific time each day as an event in my Google Calendar. And then I would start doing it every day until I started doing it automatically without having to put it in my calendar anymore. Now, I know not everyone works that way, even though this does work really well for pretty much any habit I want to develop. However, that's exactly why you want to reflect on those 5 key questions we outlined earlier to help you figure out which approach to habit automation is going to work best for you. Explore these questions for yourself again. Do a bit of digging and figure out which approach is going to work best for you. Which brings us to the 3rd and final reason you should think in systems: isolation and identification of what's not working. As I set up my system, did I encounter any problems? Did I change any of these habits? Did I end up rearranging my schedule or even taking a different approach altogether? Yeah, and that's the nature of systems in general. They should become more and more refined over time. And one way to achieve this is by using what Polya calls heuristics. So what exactly is a heuristic? You can think of a heuristic as a strategy, a mental model, or an approach to thinking that helps us solve problems. So for instance, what if my system doesn't actually help you? Either because you have an entirely different problem or simply because you as an individual have differences in how you form habits. Well, in this case, in addition to all the tools I've offered you by this point, you can use the following 8 heuristics to help troubleshoot the issue and identify what to refine and improve. And the first heuristic is inversion. Instead of asking, what should I do to learn faster? Try asking, what would guarantee I fail to learn faster? This helps you then realize some of the main pitfalls: multitasking, no review schedule, passive reading, and so on. Now, you can design your learning to avoid those pitfalls. Number 2 is bottleneck identification. The idea here is to focus your energy where the system is most constrained. For instance, let's say you're trying to learn to code, but you're stuck. You ask, where am I getting stuck most consistently? It turns out the bottleneck might be reading documentation, not logic or syntax. You can now allocate 30 minutes a day just to practice reading documentation and solving exercises using them. The third heuristic here is first principles thinking, which is simply breaking down concepts to fundamentals. So, for instance, instead of asking, what's the best LSAT prep course? You ask, what skills does the LSAT actually test? The answer? Logical reasoning, reading comprehension, and formal logic. You can now rebuild your study strategy from scratch based on those core principles. Number 4 is feedback loop awareness, which is about identifying what's reinforcing or disrupting your progress. For instance, you might notice that every time you miss a study session, you lose confidence, which makes the next session harder to start. So you add tiny daily wins. Maybe that's 5-minute daily reviews to build a positive feedback loop. Study leads to success, leads to motivation, leads to more study. Number 5 is falsification. So you might believe you're a visual learner, let's say, and so you've only been watching videos to learn. In this case, ask yourself, what would prove me wrong? Well, you could try doing 1 week of text-based learning with quizzes, and let's say you start to realize you actually retain more from reading. Well, then this helps you stop over-relying on videos and expand your learning toolkit. Number 6 is modularization, which is the act of breaking down your learning into self-contained blocks. Let's say you're learning economics and struggling with the material. Well, instead of trying to absorb full chapters, try splitting the content into these 4 modules. 1, a concept summary. What's the main idea here? 2, real-world application. What's a real-life example? 3, visual model. Can I graph this somehow? And 4, a practice question. Number 7 is layered abstraction. To apply this heuristic, try zooming in and out between specifics and big picture understanding. For instance, while studying statistics, you first understand how the t-test works, step by step. But don't stop there. Try zooming out to understand why it's useful in experimental design. This keeps your learning grounded and transferable. Finally, number 8 is add constraints. If you're scheduling everything but still not feeling like you're learning efficiently, then the problem might be that you're spending too much time on an activity. Setting boundaries can actually enhance your creativity and focus. So for instance, instead of studying for 2 hours, try committing to studying only 25 minutes a day with a 5-minute daily reflection in your journal. This has actually helped me a lot in the past. That time constraint forces you to prioritize the highest leverage material, leading to better results in less time. So I've got a system that works pretty well for me now, and I'm always optimizing it. But the question is, what's your current system for learning? How is it going? And have you determined the core problem or goal? And what can you optimize? I'd love to hear your thoughts and ideas in the comments, and if you want to keep leveling up your critical thinking to make a massive impact, not only on your own life, but also on the lives of countless others, then be sure to watch this next video.